What's going on, friends? Logan Myerz here for Cinephellas.com. Super excited to talk about the next film I've been patiently waiting for the entire year, my most anticipated film of 2019. I'm talking about Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, the story of my life. Boo! Just kidding. Setup of the film, we have Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Al Pacino all in one movie, all together for the first time ever. We have Robert De Niro playing Frank, the Irishman Sheeran. He was the famous, hitman back then in the Jimmy Hoffa days. We have Al Pacino playing Jimmy Hoffa. Hoo-ah! He plays the head of the, Teamsters union back in the day. And then we have Joe Pesci coming out of retirement for this film. It must have been pretty good if he came out of retirement to, act with his old buddies again. He plays Russell Bufalino. He was like the head of the Bufalino crime family back in the day, the mob. It's all organized crime, and it's all in good fun for Martin Scorsese film. So let's talk about it, shall we? The setup of the film, we have Robert De Niro playing Frank Sheeran. He's the hitman. This movie spans over like 5 decades. The intro of the film is like in a nursing home kind of place where we see an older Frank Sheeran before he passes away. Him talking about Jimmy Hoffa, his younger days, and how he was associated to the Jimmy Hoffa shooting and killing. The opening shots of the film are really fantastic. A lot of great oldie music, as we see in a lot of Scorsese flicks. It really sets up a beautiful atmosphere. Kind of the overall tone that Scorsese is going for in this film. Much more reserved and older group of mobsters, and more importantly, Frank Sheeran, and how much he's been through and gone through over the years, and kind of his life story. So it sets up the conversation and the introduction of Frank Sheeran meeting Russell Bufalino, played by Joe Pesci, which is utterly fantastic in this movie. I love seeing De Niro and Pesci work together on screen. They have such a beautiful chemistry between the two. It just works. Everything flows, like the dialogue. It's not like it's scripted. It's just like it's old friends, talking, catching up. There's just something magical about these two dudes. It just always works for me. He's a big deal. He owns the entire road, as Frank Sheeran says in the beginning of the film. Like, he was a big and important guy, not literally big, but he had a lot of power and he owned a lot of things and he knew everybody. So don't get in his way and don't fuck with this guy, because he will kill you. The Irishman's like a super quiet movie, not a lot of dialogue, but there's also something very intimidating about it. And you're not really sure what's gonna happen next, but just at the beginning of the film, it's just like Russell and Frank driving and their wives in the back seat. Just not a lot to talk about, but these guys are super intimidating and guys you don't want to fuck with, especially back then. So they really pull off these characters really well just from the get-go of the film. Also in The Irishman, we're introduced to other huge name actors that are working together in this film for the first time. The great actor Harvey Keitel plays Angelo Bruno, which is also head of the Bruno family back in the day, organized crime mobster. Bobby Cannavale is introduced in the film as well. He's another mobster. He was in Boardwalk Empire. And then we have Stephen Graham, which is also really, really fantastic for supporting cast. He's really great in this film. He plays another mobster. Him and Hoffa don't really hit it off too well, and there's a lot of great scenes between those two actors in prison. And more importantly, the introduction of Al Pacino about an hour into the film, of Jimmy Hoffa. He was a big deal back then. He was very famous. Everybody knew him back in the 1960s. He's saying in the film that he was more famous than the Beatles back in the 60s. Everybody knew him. It's always like the conspiracy theory, whatever happened to Jimmy Hoffa. This is really a nice setup of what happened to Jimmy Hoffa in the eyes of Frank Sheeran. I forgot to say The Irishman is based off the novel I Heard You Paint Houses, which is a fantastic book. I read it like 4 or 5 years ago. Really, really interesting, intricate detail from the eyes of Frank Sheeran. And it's a really great book, so if you guys have not checked that out, you should definitely go pick that up on Amazon or a local bookstore. Throughout the rest of the film, it's introducing more characters, really diving into the world of Jimmy Hoffa, his relationship with Frank Sheeran. They really gained this really great friendship over the years. They're best friends. And then you also have the relationship with Frank Sheeran, and Russell Bufalino, played by Pesci. Pesci basically tells him to go whack people, kill them off, people in the mob, other bad people, things like that. And it really sets up a lot of great kill scenes in this film. I was pleasantly surprised how badass Robert De Niro is in this film, playing a hitman. I mean, he goes some dark places. He does some ass whooping and some really great shots, like throwing people through glass and like shooting them in the head. Like, there's a lot of violence in like Scorsese flicks. They're not shy on the blood and violence. There's a ton of that in this film. And a lot of really great scenes, really great shots of Robert De Niro doing what he knows how to do in this film. The really fantastic aspect of this film is the use of that new de-aging technology. This movie cost like $160 million it's a lot of money they put into the technology, and the de-aging looks so fucking real. You realize these actors aren't, 40, 50 anymore. It's the technology. It just looks really well done, and it looked real to me, and it didn't take me out of the film. The first shot they used of De Niro being younger, I'm like, okay. But you get used to it, and you don't notice it throughout the rest of the movie. Like most Scorsese films, there's always beautiful camera work, the cinematography, the editing, the score, the music, costume design. It really felt like The Irishman brought you back to those times, 60s and 70s, just the way everything looked. For a lot of people that aren't familiar with those times, or the mob, or Jimmy Hoffa, he really describes it and depicts it perfectly for a new audience. One scene that was really funny that stood out to me, but was also very white-knuckled, it's this scene towards the end. It's about 20 minutes long. Frank Sheeran flying to Detroit to meet up with Hoffa, and then Hoffa's son, played by Jesse Plemons, picks him up in the car. And there's this scene about how he had a fish in the back seat. That's why it's all wet. And they're like busting Jesse Plemons' balls. Like, what kind of fish was it? You don't know what type of fish you picked up? Where'd you buy the fish? Where'd you get this? It's like, yeah, we know he didn't pick up a fish. It's all bullshit. But it was just 20 minutes long. It was like super funny, but you also know what's going to happen immediately after they stop at the house, and Jimmy Hoffa goes inside. It's not looking too good, so it was like one of the best scenes of the movie. So overall, I had a great time with Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, my most anticipated film of the year, and I was not disappointed in any way. I think this is pretty much a perfect movie. I really have nothing to complain about. I think Scorsese did a great job. It's a great cast of actors, all the big names coming together for this film for Netflix, and I think they really knocked it out of the park. Everybody returning. Joe Pesci playing this Russell Bufalino mobster. He was so intimidating, completely different from his characters in like Casino and Goodfellas, where he was always like the hothead. This time he's more calm and collect, really quiet, but super intimidating. And Robert De Niro playing Frank Sheeran, one of his best performances to date. He's been in a lot of movies over the years, a lot of shitty ones as of late, but he really pulled his A game in the Frank Sheeran role, playing the hitman, the Irishman. A lot of great scenes in this film, and seeing his story over 5 decades, in the later days being an old man in the nursing home before he passes away, and his story with Jimmy Hoffa. I thought he was one of the best performances in the film, and one of the best we've seen from Robert De Niro in a long time. And Al Pacino, what can I say? Hoorah! Always over the top. This is a perfect role for him because Jimmy Hoffa is super loud. He's a crowd pleaser, always super excited, yelling, and that's Al Pacino. If you think of him over the years, he's always like going over the top and yelling and screaming and super excited, and just a perfect role for him. Even at his age, he still looked really great. I think he just did a really great job of Jimmy Hoffa's character, really capturing who that person was back then. Larger than life character, and again, one of the best performances of the film. He really worked well alongside Frank Sheeran, Robert De Niro, and then, Pesci and Pacino had some really great scenes in the movie, button heads, and they don't really care for each other, which ultimately ends in the demise of Mr. Jimmy Hoffa. And I think Scorsese is just a fantastic storyteller. Every movie he puts out gets better and better. And this, The Irishman, is his best film to date. It's his magnum opus, just a perfect film. It's a movie you guys don't want to miss. It's 3.5 hours long. It doesn't feel that long. It really goes by super fast. It keeps you intrigued, invested in these characters, the story they're telling you, and all the different time periods that they come across in the film, and then the introduction of Jimmy Hoffa and the hitman himself, Frank Sheeran. And this is a film you don't want to miss, so definitely check it out on Netflix. It's streaming right now. So I'm giving Martin Scorsese's The Irishman a 5 out of 5. What? Frank Sheeran hair pieces. So what did you guys think of the brand new film, The Irishman? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? What did you think of the ending? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe. This is Logan Myerz signing out. My mates up here, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Joe Pesci. Until the next video review. Cheers!